Welcome back to Common Language Podcast, where we break down today's complex policy issues into easy to understand ideas, helping curious minds stay informed and empowered.
Today's episode will cover a discussion about the connection between politics, culture, and television by sharing reflections on Love Story and breaking down the Warner Brothers Discovery/Paramount merger, all with our very special guest, Taylor, a TV exec and pop culture aficionado.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here. You two are amazing. And yeah, I love what you're doing, and I'm so excited to be a part of it.
Amazing. So before we get into our conversation, let's go through our 2 pieces of vocab for this episode.
Okay.
First, Love Story and What Is It? It is a Ryan Murphy produced biographical anthology limited series on FX/Hulu, focusing on the high profile romance in the 90s around John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. And it's based on Elizabeth Beller's book, Once Upon a Time, The Captivating Life of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. And the series explores their relationship and the Kennedys as a political and cultural institution. And this is feeding into antitrust laws as well. So what are antitrust laws or competition laws? They are made to promote fair market competition by regulating monopolies, prohibiting anti-competitive mergers, and banning practices like price fixing and bid rigging. Enforced by the DOJ and FTC, these laws aim to protect consumer welfare, foster innovation, and prevent the abuse of market power by large firms. So these are 2 themes that we're going to be covering in the podcast. But first, we really want to get to know our girl. Taylor, can you give us a little bit of info on you, who you are, your background, and all the things?
Okay. My name is Taylor Sumners. Matt, can I say our connection, or is this like secret?
Sure, go for it. Let's peel back the curtain.
Yeah, this is like true BTS. Okay, Mackenzie's my cousin. So that's mainly why I'm here. But no.
So if you guys are seeing a resemblance, it's the genetics.
Yes. And so proud of you and everything you do. Always an inspiration. But me, so from New Jersey, born and raised, I lived there most of my life. I went to college at Colgate in upstate New York. Then after that, I worked a couple years. Then I got my MBA in marketing and finance at Fordham in New York. And I think, Casey, I met you around that time when I was living in the city. Even before that, probably, when we would come to visit Mackenzie.
Lived in the same building.
Did we?
Yes.
Yeah, Taylor, I told you this.
No.
We lived in the same exact building on the Upper West Side.
I lived in.
You never told me that. So you understand, girl.
Girl. That was my first apartment ever. Yeah.
So yeah, I lived in New York 2 years while I was going to Fordham. Then I decided that I wanted to pivot from marketing and finance and work in TV. I didn't know the job that I came to have was a thing. And then once I figured it out, I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. I've always loved TV, film. I've always loved pop culture. And it just felt like the perfect blend of skill set and interests. So then I moved out to LA without a job, which I don't recommend. Let me just say that now. I do not recommend that people do that now, especially if you want to work in TV. Don't do it. But I came at the right time. It worked for me. And so I've been in LA, like I said before, for almost 7 years. And I started working at a production company called Amblin when I first started. And I was bottom of the totem pole. I was a production assistant. So I was ordering coffees, picking up celebrities in my golf cart, but I was on the Universal lot. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I worked there for 2 years. Then I started working at Amazon for 4.5 years. And when I was there, I got promoted to creative exec, which is essentially like I have my own slate of shows and I just shepherd them from pitch stage to actual production. So I was doing that. And now I'm looking for my next thing. We can get into that later because it ties into everything that we're talking about now and just like the state of the industry. But yeah, that's a little bit of my lore. And yeah, like I said, I spend most of my time on TikTok, watching TV, things like that. My brain is rotted to the core and I wouldn't change it.
Nor should you. That sounds amazing.
Yes. I love that, Taylor. And I love following you on TikTok, and all the content you've been putting out recently has been super interesting because you bring such a unique and interdisciplinary perspective.
Yeah.
One thing that my mom, since we've revealed the connection here, my mom is Taylor's aunt. One thing that my mom loves to brag about Taylor, she'll always be like, "Oh, my economist.
You always love
This is sociologist." Taylor loves to say that.
She does.
Because Taylor has a background in sociology and econ. That's what you got your
undergrad
bachelor's in,
yeah.
Taylor. And so how do you apply that lens, or how does that lens come into play when you're making TV shows?
Yeah, econ is like a sleeper. Like people don't realize, but like that just teaches you how the world works and how things move together. which was just really good in opening my mind to see like how everything is connected and like one thing will set off a chain reaction and cause different things happen. But I would say sociology is actually one of the biggest things that helped me. Like sociology is like the study of people, institutions, humanity, how we interact with one another, our dynamics. You can focus on like race, gender, things like that. But you're really looking at people in society through like theoretical lens and analytical lens. And I think it just helps you understand people's not necessarily motivations, because that's more psychology, but like why certain things and certain environments create certain outcomes and allows you to find patterns and trends. And I think that just changed the way that I looked at people, dynamics, communities. And obviously, when you're making TV, that's what you're focused on.
Such a good point. I do want to segue into Love Story and start to apply some of this into like real life, because I do feel that this story has been somewhat captivating for a wider audience, and can speak for myself just in this whole story. We're all 90s kids, but like I remember so much of this happening in real time. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective, Taylor, on how you feel that the show was handled and like your first initial takes, and then we can get into some more of the nitty-gritty piece of it too.
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts about the show. And just to be completely candid, I was not going to watch it because as someone who watches a lot of TV, I think the bigger reason was I just have IP fatigue. And this is essentially IP doing like a story on people that we know well. And I was just wanting some original content. But I also got caught up in the ethics of actually like producing a show like this. And look, TV is such a powerful medium, and I think people often forget that. And that's something that I always tried to keep at the forefront of my mind when working in TV, because I was in a position where I could potentially say, oh, I really like this story. Let's buy this. Let's work on this. Or once we already bought something, like being in the edit and being like, this is actually not okay what we're doing and things like that. So I've faced hard decisions, mostly in unscripted, but I just felt like, one, Ryan Murphy has such a, I would say, divisive approach to storytelling, and he's very polarizing, and he has made his name off of doing these really high profile interest pieces and then turning them into TV shows. Like he did this with the OJ trial, like he did Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton and like Dahmer. And so he just has this history of doing this, and in my opinion, not always in the most respectful way. And so I felt a type of way about that. But I especially felt because John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn and Lauren, they died so young and they're not here to speak to their side of the story. I felt like a strong way about just like them having no agency in this. So I say all to say, I initially wasn't going to watch it, but then I did. I started to hear like how good it was. And I was like, okay, let me just be part of the conversation, see what's going on. So I did. I've watched the entire thing. I binged it. And I think what you said, Casey, is really important about like being a 90s baby. That's to me what one thing that the show did really amazingly is just the environment and the setting and the direction and just capturing that energy of that age and really leaning into the nostalgia.
100%. I so agree. And also for me, I was very hesitant to watch the show. Also more so because I follow Jack Schlossberg on all his social media, and like he's running for New York 12, and there's a lot going on here that feels very palpable. His sister Tatiana recently passed away, and that was really tragic. And I think we can get into also the moral and ethical pieces of this, and also working in television and feeling that type of pressure. Because like you mentioned, it is a huge platform and so multi-generational.
I'm curious to know from your end, Taylor, when you think about making shows depicting real people, because in this case, it seemed like they didn't have the Kennedys buy-in. In fact, Jack Schlossberg came out and said, you're making money off of my family and this is wrong. And Daryl Hannah came out saying your portrayal of me is wrong. So
they did her so dirty.
Think about that when you don't have buy-in.
I think it's really difficult, but also there's so much nuance, because I was like, because I felt so adamant about like its exploitative nature and not liking it, I had to go back, because I'm like, I watch a lot of things based on real people, but like why for this was it such a sticking point for me? And I think the point about them having a really untimely death was also like how tragic it is and like how much that family has gone through. But on the other hand, they are public figures. And I think you can argue Carolyn was not. And that was part of the issue. She actively did not want to be a public figure. And so I think that is important when you have to think about who you're depicting. Would she have liked being depicted at all? Because I think, one, it's always amazing to get family buy-in. But two, it's you're not always going to get that. And does that mean you should tell someone's story? I don't know. So I think it's like a case by case basis is what I've come to. And that's how I tried to approach things in my career, especially working on like documentaries and things like that. I would say this is like when it comes into play the most for me specifically. One thing sticks out in my mind. I'm sure you guys all know the downfall of our leader, Wendy Williams, and how she's been going through it. But like a couple years ago, her doc came across my desk and she actually was a part of it. However, I don't think she was in the right mind to make those decisions from what I saw. And I didn't feel comfortable putting my hat in the ring and saying that I think we should pursue it. Was it entertaining? Yeah. Would people watch? Of course. But like, I'm also putting on my like, okay, this is bigger than like entertainment and like these are real people hat. And you know what? She doesn't seem like in the right state of mind to like even give away that agency. And therefore, like, I don't feel comfortable being a part of it.
I think the fact that Carolyn was not a public person and her sister was even less of a public person,
Yeah.
and the fact that they're so essential to this story, it does have an additional ick factor for me when we think about like the ethics of things. All of the Kennedys had to be in the public eye at some degree,
Yeah.
but there is also Carolyn's side. She was not a public figure and she died really young with her sister. You think about the fact that her family sued the Kennedys after their death.
They were at
And
odds.
yeah,
Yeah. You bring up a good point, Casey, because the more I watched it, I started to then get into Anne Freeman, Carolyn's mother's perspective. And I was just like, imagine being in her shoes. And I think in the finale episode, spoiler alert, like they have this amazing scene between Anne Freeman and Carolyn Kennedy sharing her perspective. I've had 2 daughters who passed, and only people seem to care about the fact that John's life was lost. And they're obviously in this huge shadow of not only this man who was beloved, but this family that has been in the social consciousness for decades. And like just the power of that. So then I started thinking about, okay, I'm very curious how her family feels about this, because they're obviously not very public. And I think for me, that was like the biggest bright side to this show and doing it. It was getting to see her family's perspective. Whether or not it was true, obviously we'll never know. I'm taking everything with a grain of salt. However, just shedding more light on them and their family and giving them space to like actually have a voice of this whole story, I think was like super powerful. And I think so well done.
Yeah. And I'm interested to hear, Taylor, why is there such a fascination with the Kennedy family, and particularly like in the social phenomenon context, even
Yeah.
outside of politics? Like, why is it such a story people have latched onto?
And I'm really curious about your guys' like the political perspective, but just as a person that consumes a lot of pop culture and media, I think there's a few things. I think one, we don't have a monarchy, and the Kennedys essentially were the replacement of that for us. And they were filling a need that I think the public just wanted to have, this aspirational family that just meant so much to the entire nation. So I think that's a big part. I consider the Kennedys to be our monarchy. I don't think a family has come nearly as close to that. So I think people hold on super tightly. And then people develop these like parasocial relationships with people that are so strong. And you have to think about it at the time too. There was no social media. You weren't getting access to people. And I think JF Kennedy Jr. was just so charismatic and really just like people saw him from when he was a kid in that tragedy and always held them in his hearts. And they felt like they had a piece of him. And then to see him grow up in the public eye and just be such a ham and so beloved, I think people just, they couldn't get enough and just were just like obsessed. And that's what happens. But I'm curious, like politically, do the Kennedys hold like that significant of a space? I'm assuming yes, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I would say similarly on the politics side, I don't think we've seen such a legacy as extensive and as impactful in politics. I'm thinking obviously of the Bushes.
Yeah.
Like really the Kennedys have that on lock. And we see even this generation, right? With Jack
Yeah.
Cuthbert running for a congressional seat in New York right now. Obviously, it goes back to JFK being our 35th president. And then I don't know if this is speculation, but also the idea that there's such a big family. And I think that something adds the fuel when we think of RFK, who is currently our HHS secretary. We have covered him and the Maha movement extensively on this podcast. And we said this before, RFK, for all of the like crazy ideas and misinformation he puts out there about vaccine, I find him so fascinating, and listening to him is
Yeah. Power of the Kennedy name.
we do have this Kennedy dynasty that has been proven
Mhm.
generation after generation. And it's not just the men. The men are doing more of the politics
Yeah.
in the front of the camera. But let's look at all of the women that have also been involved in this dynasty. They're all icons, people
Yeah.
who we really look to for style, grace, elegance throughout the times. Jackie O, Carolyn, especially as of late because of the show. But for someone who has worked in fashion for my entire career, Carolyn's always been top notch. Like everyone's always felt that way. There's also this notion that the 90s were just like an incredible time in fashion.
Yeah.
And if anyone is looking for some more content on that, in 2024, Vogue put out this docuseries. I don't know if you've seen it, Taylor, but it's called Vogue in the 90s. And it's excellent. And they really go through to show what happens when different industries intersect, and how the 90s were such a
Mhm.
collective between the entertainment industry, the music industry, fashion, and culture in a way that had never been before. And
Yeah.
so on that point too, let's get into this merger, because what the heck?
Do we think it's going to go through? This has been a trend in the industry for so long. There's consolidation on top of consolidation, but this one feels a little different because just looking at the two properties that are coming together, Skydance, Paramount, and Warner Brothers, it's like there's so much overlap. And I don't understand how you argue that there's not. And there's so many redundancies. And like, what is going to be the public good of any of this? Like, I struggle to really find one. And that's why it feels like, to me, just a political, like, economic gain and no real positive impact on the entertainment industry. It's going to impact everyone down the line, people's lives and livelihood. And that's just like the conversations that I've been having across the industry. And I think people that work in these spaces, we already feel out of control, but this especially will create that to another level of just, okay, what are we doing here? Are we here to actually make art and give people things that they can consume and love and talk about? Or are we just trying to make money?
Yeah, I think, and just to level set here, essentially what is slated to happen should this vote go through later in April is that Paramount Skydance would merge with Warner Brothers Discovery for $110 billion. So that's how much money we're talking about here, right? And that's the bottom line that they're looking at. But it's not a done deal yet. And of course, they are facing intense regulatory scrutiny from the federal government due to competition laws like the antitrust laws and potential national security concerns. And Taylor, you were talking about the impacts to like the industry, like the staffing and budget bottom lines. I'm curious to elaborate on that a little bit, but also to know what impact you think it will have on television. When these mergers happen, does it impact creativity? Does it impact the type of shows that get greenlit and what we ultimately have the choice to consume as viewers?
Yeah, no, for sure. There's just less and less outlets. So Warner Brothers has a specific style and things that they go after. Like HBO is also within the Warner Brothers family, just for people who like aren't super aware. Paramount also has its own identity. Like Warner Brothers is one of our long legacy studios, and like erasing that, which is what this merger would essentially do, is leaving a lot of creative on the table. Because if you just think about it, if you only have, let's say, 5 outlets, you're not going to get as much diversity in content, different tastes. You're just consolidating not only like the companies themselves, but also just like the content and the creativity, and making it in less and less people's voices. So there's less room for specificity and different things. So I think that's the sad part for me. You're having these institutions who have continuously brought out these really amazing films, television shows, and things like that, sort of won't be able to do that anymore. And in terms of how it affects everyone else outside of the creative, it's just like when you have companies that merge, like people get laid off. And that's just the reality. With this case in particular, there are a ton of redundancies. And the outcome isn't going to be the company just gets double its size. That's not how it works, because they're trying to cut costs. Like TV is increasingly expensive, so expensive. Amazon bought MGM Studios in 2022-ish. And the FTC was reviewing that deal, but there was no big reveal period because it wasn't as contentious as this one. But after that, we merged with MGM. Like they all came to move into our offices, and there was like maybe 6 months after a huge round of layoffs. And that's just what happens. And I feel for these people who are at these companies who have worked really long and are just, you're not going to have jobs.
One thing we try to do here is think about when these decisions happen, when these policies inform these decisions, who's the winners and who are the losers. And it seems like you're saying, like, it seems like the winners here are like the executives and like the
David
very
Zaslav, like
people.
he's set to make millions and millions of dollars off this deal. And just like for full transparency, I was laid off recently at the end of last year. I would say it was a few things that led to that. There wasn't a merger or anything, but I think it had to do with COVID, the WGA SAG strike, and then the pullback from doing things like that. And I know so many people who are laid off right now, so many smart and intelligent people. And that's across industries, but specifically in TV, because it's so unstable. And there's so many things like this decision to merge these two companies that can completely alter the state of the industry. Things don't happen in a vacuum. It feeds into every other part of the industry.
I keep thinking of the Roaring 20s and how we're actually in the 20s again right now, and the neglect for people during that time, just in terms of history repeating itself and things being cyclical in nature, we always see things come back around and it's okay, here's the same exact test. How is society going to respond now? And I feel that we are in that time where we are seeing the richest of the rich just absolutely abuse their resources at the expense of everybody else. So at what point now is there going to be a big uprising? Because you are up against such powerhouses, and this exact model is happening across all industries. And where are we going from here? Because at a certain point, what else are we merging?
Yeah, at least in TV, this has caused a huge surge of people funding their own projects and doing them on their own, like getting a camera, which I think like tech has democratized a lot of that in an amazing way. And people are just making their own content. So if you're a creator now, that's the power position. If you can write, if you can direct, if you can produce, people are just doing their own things. They're not going through these huge networks anymore. And I think that will be the tipping point to see if these individual actors and their efforts to produce their own content and get it out there, if that starts to rise and become successful.
I'm also curious to hear from you, Taylor, aside from the like antitrust policies and the competitive regulatory policies, are there any other policy issues that most directly impact your work
Yeah.
and that you have seen at the intersection or at play in the TV industry?
Yeah. The biggest, I think, that we've been dealing with most recently is the DEI rollback and Trump's just feelings on DEI in general and how that has shifted the industry. Like we were in such a place, and I think these are two interesting sides of the spectrum. 2019, 2020, COVID, George Floyd obviously was a huge thing culturally and politically, but it really impacted a lot of industries and like their DEI practices and the stories that we were telling. Specifically for TV, that was like a huge turning point. After that, you saw all these companies that wanted diverse stories. It was like overnight. We want this story about this community. We want this. And it was moving in that direction for sure, but it just felt like it became more timely. And then not only to mention like the hiring, trying to get diverse executives and female like POC. It was just like this huge shift in the industry. At least where I was, there were specific goals to meet in terms of DEI. That was in front of the camera. So actors, but it was also behind the camera and like directors, producers, but also below the line people as well. So there was a concerted effort to make shows look more diverse and be made by more diverse groups of people. But they stopped doing that policy after the Trump vocalization that DEI was trash and what have you. And you can look, Amazon, like Jeff Bezos is clearly close to the administration. Content that we know is going to hit with a lot of people. So you're losing those more niche stories that talk about different cultures and people and different experiences. And now it's just a mainstreamification of everything.
Like rose-colored glasses on everything now to make it seem better than it is.
And it's just like the priority isn't creating content that people haven't seen before. That's why you get all these reboots and IP. And so it's all related, but I think that was probably like one of the bigger public things and like political things that indirectly but directly impacted like the work I'm doing and like the kind of stories that we're able to make. Because like you can champion a story, but leadership isn't going to want to greenlight it if it's not going to appeal to XYZ people. And it sucks for the viewers too. It's like they lose also.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because this goes in a little bit more to the unscripted reality side of television content. But what I've been seeing online is a lot of people are saying that obviously, right, TV and media and culture and politics and government are always like reflecting each other off of each other.
Yeah.
They're like mirrors in that way. And one observation people have been making on the reality TV side is shows like Love is Blind is casting more conservative and talent for their shows. And then you see those stories play out, right?
Yeah.
They're talking from their perspectives. Those are the stories that are highlighted. Those are the stories that are told. And the people are hypothesizing that's meant to be intentional because it's reflective or it's in response to an administration that is saying, if you don't air these people, we're not going to give you your licenses. Or if you do air these people, we're going to take away your licenses, which is what the FCC is actually saying right now. It's happening. It's so crazy.
Obviously, Trump winning again really highlighted like that half the country felt this type of way. And listen, people don't ever want to leave money on the table. So if they're like, people out here really feel like this, then we're going to represent it in the show. I'm thinking of Love is Blind, the most recent season, and the MAGA couple on there. You wouldn't have done that a couple years ago. They wouldn't have disclosed that, or I don't think it would have made the final edit.
I think about all the creators that go on TikTok that do, here's the breakdown of the shows you watch, and this is their political leanings, just for people's context. They go through Southern Charm or Summer House or Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. It does make you feel a certain type of way.
Bring back Summer House, Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
You know what?
Instead,
And
the
his-
Roni reboot in Florida, okay?
That nobody asked for.
That nobody asked for.
It's tricky, man.
This is why it's very tricky. We've had so much fun recording this with you, Taylor. Can you let our listeners know where they can go and follow you so they can hear more and learn more about you and your work?
Yes. Okay, guys, I'm trying to break out on TikTok, so we'll see. But you can follow me at Taylor Sumners on TikTok. I do a lot of show reviews. I try to give an insight into the industry. I have this series called Non-Nepo Baby in TV that I've been doing, just like giving insider information, trying to help the girls, help the guys, like get a job in TV. But yeah, that's where you can find me. My Instagram is the same, but I'm out here. I'm trying to figure it out like everybody else, but have fun while doing it. Laugh a little. I love a little laugh cackle moment.
We love that.
Amazing. Yes, it's exactly what we try to do on Common Language. So if you want to hear us yap and laugh more, be sure to be following Common Language on Instagram, TikTok, Substack, as well as our podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye.